From rising material costs to project delays and design indecision, today's remodelers are navigating more than just blueprints. Joining us today is Chris Parnell, who's here to help us understand how he keeps clients confident, projects moving forward, and teams aligned in a market full of challenges right now. And we're going to get started right now. Thanks so much for joining us, Chris. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you, Clark?
I'm good. I'm good. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your company and a bit of history there? Because I know there's been some changes for you, some positive changes. Tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, some new things. So for many, many years, I've been Parnell Construction, a sole proprietorship in the Northern California area. And my family has a pretty rich history of home building and remodeling. But just this year, as a matter of fact, I got the email back from the Contractor State License Board yesterday, and maybe even the evening before, stating that the new corporation is now maintaining my Parnell
Nice.
construction license, right? And that company is Coast Sierra.
Got it.
And what we changed because we want to broaden what we offer. And I took on a partner, so we have a bigger crew capability. But mostly we partner with not only subcontractors, but other full contractors. And I'm the individual that leans into technology for this work. So I do some 3D modeling and more advanced cost breakdowns. So that's kind of where we are right now. The brand new reveal will happen, but we are officially, as the CSLB, Coast Sierra.
Congratulations. I know that process is exhausting, and I can
Yeah.
imagine the paperwork and back and forth. So really where our paths intersect is we do, especially in this market right now, we're doing a lot of cash out refinances for people that want to do remodels, right? They're sitting on a ton of equity. It's pretty cheap money, even with interest rates hanging, mid sixes, seven. So, we help guide customers in that regard, but we also do fix and flip loans, right? So loans that allow people to borrow a certain percentage of what should be the post remodel value of the home and allows them to go do that. So it could be investors, it could be individuals that buy their dream house and want to do a remodel. So Chris and I are in a BNI chapter together, and our business is kind of intertwined there. We try and do the stuff like this video, just to be very educational about, hey, this is what you should be looking for in a general contract. We hear nightmare after nightmare of people that, well, I got this guy, and he said he had a team, and my 3-month project turned into 9, and it's 80% over budget, blah blah blah. So we're going to just talk about some of the things that we hear coming up, and Chris and his team are very dialed when it comes to the scope and the project and maintaining everything. We're going to talk about some of the common questions, and the first one we run into is, how are customers currently dealing with the cost of goods going up so much? How are customers dealing with that? And really, how do you deal with that in a very large project, which could run over a period of time where there could be a lot of fluctuation?
Yeah, it's funny. Really, only about, and this is a statistic I've read, I'm pretty sure it's accurate, but I'm not sure if there's a percentage variance. But only about 7% of residential building materials are deeply affected, but they're affected by up to like 22, 20 plus percent. So it's that odd thing where, as a individual bidding out a job and going through the pricing, going through my calculator, it could be going smoothly for, according to that statistic, 93% of what I'm pricing. And, the fuzzy part to me is not only that those few items or the minority of items are heavily impacted, but it's still unclear exactly how that's impacting labor. Like, I have to maintain the quality workforce that I brag about, and it's still too fuzzy to determine what's happening there. I don't have enough history. I don't see anybody really writing on that because I think it's more of a long-term thing. But if it becomes an issue, it's a major issue for
Yeah,
me that
yeah.
I can't work around. So that's something that I try to do when I say I partner with other contractors. I do not usually say, "Oh, that's a different workforce," but the 3 contractors in particular that I work with, we're always looking for places to fill where either a surprise need or just a expertise need is required. So it's always on the radar in front of us. We hope we never have to use it just because of lack of workforce. But
Got it. Got it.
prices are interesting. It's that 7%, and I think that's up to 10 possibly, but those are heavily impacted where there's not a huge showing on the rest of it.
Okay. And then in your projects, are you handling all the acquisition of materials? Do you ever have projects where you're like, hey, you can take this on if you want, if you feel you want to own that piece of the project, or is it's pretty much soup to nuts?
It's usually full, because I prefer to keep I have a pass on my benefit of purchasing that I have, but also I just need to have that kind of control of process so that what I'm saying, I'm guaranteeing win, lose, or draw, mistake or no mistake, it's all on me. I do have requests where people say, listen, I want to purchase my materials on my miles credit card. I'm like, great.
Yeah.
It's not that I want to buy them. It's that I want to control the aspect of, acquiring them. So, and that's because I need it. And then if there's an excuse, like I'm going through this right now where we're doing some bamboo decking and it's obviously a product from China, even though it doesn't say, but it's like, I don't know I lived in Southeast Asia. I know where bamboo comes from in quantities like that. And they first sent me the wrong color. So we didn't even open it. We just sent it back. But then the delays were not well explained because I don't think my supplier knew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's a
it's
black
one
hole.
it's one of those kind of scenarios. Yeah. And if that
So
was left in the hand of the homeowner, that would be a disaster because I literally show up sometimes. I ask them to say, okay, this is non traditional, but I want you to approach and reach out.
yeah,
I get to have that just because of my awareness over time of how it works.
which is a great segue to my next question is like, how do you address the communication gap that most customers, most people that we speak to, they run into a problem and there's just misalignment, like all like, on a big piece of the project. How do you address the communication gap in these projects?
Okay, don't let me forget that we're going to be talking about like massive misalignment in it, but let me start with something different. It's tough to communicate for two people to communicate sometimes without any
Yeah,
interference.
noise.
And then sometimes it's like hand to glove. And you never know, nor should you judge when those happen. The trick is to find the system. Now, it helps that I'm married to a therapist, but also it's also just the experience of doing it over time and time. You kind of get a read and you need to be more sensitive to the immediate feedback you get, as well as maybe the simmering feedback to know if you're giving too much or too little. Because quite honestly, too much sharing of information can overwhelm people and it stymies the decision process. We know that. You go to a restaurant, huge menu, you're like, I don't know what to pick. I've trained myself to, regardless of the menu at a restaurant, I'm like, okay, I can decide matter
Yep.
moments. It's probably from what I do at work. So oftentimes there's designers and homeowners. There's engineers, designers, homeowners, architects, like it can be a lot. So generally, we just try to keep a straight business level of
Okay.
communication, but also just circle back around. And if it has to be a little more personal level, just say, hey, I don't know if I'm getting this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it seems to me that the conversation we hear is the the homeowner, the one paying for the work, has this idea in their head of how this project's going to go, and they're entering it with the best intentions, and we've had a good experience, and with we've heard of good experience with other places. We feel really confident going into this, and then I don't know if it's a consistent time, if it's on the tail end of the project or what have you, but there just seems to be this gap that it grows over time of, well, we thought this would be happening by X, it's not, and there's just not active communication on what's going on, and on our side it's impacted because typically some of the loans, especially if it's fix and flip, there's a clock ticking,
Right.
right? We gotta
Right.
get going. They don't like taking 24-month terms on this. They want to get it done, get out from under the loan. So yeah, it's an interesting challenge. I can't say that I have the answer. I've done a number of pretty major remodels. Can't say that I've had the number, only in that I'm more efficient at tracking stuff myself and saying when, what's realistic, what's the overage, what should I really expect? Is this way out of ordinary for this experience? And it sounds like you guys are just at a professional level, setting the expectation up front, keeping it very business focused and keeping emotion out of it for the most part.
Yeah, and it circles back to what we promised on the last question. We'll get back to
Yeah.
the completely off the rails
Yeah.
version. In any of those cases, it's why we appreciate someone in your position, because one of the elements that can help you get there is a lack of continuity to schedule of payments. Because purchasing has to take place, and I start constantly throwing my credit way out to get something started, and then I eke it back. I'm blunt, and I'm just simple about the facts. Like, listen, I'm buying this part of your house for you right now. But when it shows up on your property, it's your stuff because it's all what we agreed to. And they're like, oh, yeah. The funny part is that usually the preconceived notion is worse than reality. People are like, you're going to terrorize my house. We're going to hate each other. And, it's generally that's the great one where they come in and their expectations are so low, it's nothing to beat them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But the truth is like you said, it's about the setting the expectations for what the standard communication is, and then being aware of whether you need to go above or even lighten up on what you're doing.
And you teed up the next question, and I know this is something that is special for you guys, but how do you address the "I just can't see it" syndrome? That stalls in making decisions, or like, Chris, I hear what you're saying, I just can't see it. How do you address that? Because I know you guys have a unique way of approaching that.
Yeah, it's very, very typical. I mean, as well as I, and anybody listening or watching will be, oh, they described it to me, but I really didn't know what they're talking about till I
Yeah.
saw it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a crucial part of our business. So we need to get over that hump. And some clients are just great. It's just going like, you know what? You've been doing this. I'll just wait to see. But other people, it really does kind of rack them with a sense of like, don't know. And then they start kind of micro managing their littler choices within that. And it's not an ideal situation. So I try to use not just the technology of 3D modeling where I show an example of the finished product, but we try to highlight, how when I show you a model like that, it is not the end all be all. Those are completely changeable. And if you need to see a more detailed version of part of that, I'll send you that. Or we'll even go to a space where I've already done it or I've seen it somewhere being done and we can look at it physically. But there are varying degrees. It's like we joke about, I hate to pick on people, but it's that friend that has no facial recognition. Like they keep thinking the same person is like everywhere. And like that person looks nothing like that. So if you have that, then I feel for you. Um, be aware of that fact if you're looking at a remodel job because you're trying to change something that you've been looking at for a very long time, typically. And you're trying to say, how can I erase all that and see something new? Just be prepared for the effect. You
Yeah.
don't have to change your ways. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We did a project in our backyard, a pergola wired with TV and everything. And like when I was dealing with the contractor, I knew exactly, like we were talking materials and bracing and roofing and drainage and everything. And my wife's like, I don't care about all that. What's it going to look like in the space?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're
Great.
moving, a portion of our yard is going to look completely different. I can't visualize what we're talking about here. And
Yeah.
so we just literally had to get out pen and paper and start drawing like,
Yeah.
this would be the view heading on. This is what you'd see. This is the difference. And I think that's, when I've heard you talk about that, I was like, man, that just gets things off on the right foot. I'm like, I finally,
Yeah.
there's alignment, whether, husband and wife, whoever, but they're like, okay, I've got at least somewhat of a visual representation of where we're going. There's going to be changes and it's not going to be 100% like that, but visually I understand where we're heading, and probably also helps them understand like, wow, this is a lot of effort. Like this is
Yeah.
not, this isn't somebody coming in 3 weeks and knocking this out. There's a lot going in here. And then, one of the other areas that is a real pain point is, call it the last 20% of the project, right? And let me talk about what I think happens with most general contractors, and you can tell me if I'm crazy, but I think what happens is the contractors get in, they're excited about the project, they're getting started, they're knocking down walls, they're doing all that. And then you get to the point where you got a punch list and there's just small little things that need to get done. And in the GC's head, it's like, all right, what's next? Like I need to be thinking about my next job because this one's
More than
closing out.
what's next. It
Yeah.
may have already started.
It may have
It
already
may have
started.
already started.
Right. And
Yeah,
so
which
this
is a tough
last
spot to be in.
20% might be an aggressive number, but like, closing out a job, like getting the portalet off my property and like knowing that this is done. Not saying that, you're not going to have to come back and do a couple other things, but it just feels like that last 20% before the finish line, it's kind of like the last 2 minutes in a basketball game. A lot of whistles, takes forever. Nobody really knows why, and it's very frustrating. Like, how do you address that within your projects?
First, I do want to comment on a basketball game. It's getting worse.
Yeah, it is
Personal
getting
opinion
worse.
thrown in here.
Yes.
I'm just kidding. But you got a great point. And again, what I said about someone like you being involved does help trim away a lot of the issues because it's a known schedule. You don't really have any excuses about, purchasing or funding to get behind you and to hide behind, I should say. But the true thing is, and this may sound a little blunt and jarring, but I never worry about the next thing because I possibly am already doing something while I'm doing your job. But I would never do two jobs that require me to be split. Right. So I will do the big crew that we've enhanced with the transition from Parnell Construction to Coast Sierra means that we're doing a lot of basically routine jobs. And all I need to do is that the work that I need to do usually happens between, 7 and 8 in the morning, and then after 4:30, just for a little bit of time. So at the very worst, I might not be able to immediately respond to something that came in after hours on an email or a text, but that's about the only change. Now, with everybody, you did nail it. Punch lists are a big thing. You should have somebody on your crew that is dedicated, at least one person that is dedicated and used to that routine of packing the vehicle properly for maybe a couple different stops to knock out punch lists.
Got it.
Someone you trust, someone who can figure out the social scenario of walking onto a different job site very quickly. But also, everybody at that stage has gotten fatigue. There's contractor fatigue, there's homeowner fatigue. Generally, for everybody, it's just like messy fatigue. I'm tired of the stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, I had when I was a foreman back in the day, I had a very eccentric contractor that I worked for. And I'd seen him give this conversation plenty of time when he's talking with his clients. And it's, listen, I know how tough it is. You're paying me a lot of money to come in here and destroy your house. And you're hoping it goes back together, let alone the way you want it to. And, he had different approaches based on whatever the client's or the project situation was. But the one thing I can almost always count on, and not always, it's not realistic to think so. But usually there's some moments where there's stress on the job that leads to that fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when I say, listen, I get so many of these exact moments that turn into I'll be sitting months after, maybe a year after, and you're going to send me a nice letter saying, we're just sitting in the space and we love it, or some variation of that. And it's not that I'm expecting that or need that. I just want them to know that this moment, snapshot of this moment in time, is not everything. It's
Yeah.
just this moment in time. And
Yeah,
so
I think
we have to remember that too to maintain the longevity to just keep going through the end of the project.
yeah, I think the key word you mentioned is just fatigue, right?
Yeah. Yep.
You've uprooted, I mean, kids in the house, no matter what, you're uprooting their life, you're changing their daily pattern. Like there's only so much people can take, and I think I do like the idea you mentioned of having somebody dedicated to that and literally like packing the truck. Like we got 4 projects, and this is the punch list for 1. This is 2. Do I have everything? And I know how to get in there and manage that. It's its own project of like these are the 10 things I need to do. They could vary widely, electrical, paint, whatever. But I do like that idea of somebody dedicated just to that. And I guess my last question is really around the people, right? The people that you hire to do the work. Like, how do you identify the right team for a project?
It's tough because if I was just focusing on skills, I have a pretty good sense of that. I have a pretty good sense of where like for me to go find a really good carpenter is easy if not if their availability is there, but to identify them as are they better than me? That's actually a pretty good scope of people because I'm not a great carpenter. Sometimes people say, what's your favorite tool?" And I'm like, the pencil that I stick in my hat, because all I do all day long is constantly solve mini problems all the time. I'm improvising constantly, even though there's a set of plans that are perfectly laid out right in front of me, because nothing is fully fleshed out until we're in the field putting hammer to nail
Yeah.
head, or, screw
Hands-on
to
material.
panel. Yeah. So it's the trick is just being very flexible, very present. And therefore, when I look at my employees or the workforce, to say they're my employees, like one of my partner, I have his brother and his dad working with us, right? So it's generally more of a little mix of, I need people who aren't like me, because I don't need them to slow down. I need them to do their work that they really like to do and specialize in, and just keep chugging away at that. So it's kind of familiarity for me. I'm not going to speak for every contractor, but it's that perfect soup of, both personalities, work tendencies, and just reliability. And those things you can't guess. You have to see, either you really trust the references, or you just commit to them and see how it works out. And then you got to be a little forgiving, because we're all just human.
All just human, and I think, your reputation goes a long way too. If anybody that you hire, they're going to know the reputation of Coast Sierra and be like, hey, all right, so this is what we're walking into. These are the expectations. This is how they run their business. This is what we can expect on the job site. I would imagine that goes a long way too, and very important in your sphere of influence among those people.
Yeah, I just to put a button that up. I had a client that we didn't have a great relationship. It was just brief. We don't really know each other. They needed something very quickly, but they knew me from the reference they got. Was I did a lot of work on their friend's house, and they needed someone to come in and do something. I said, I'm going to send so and so over. They're like, is he? I could already tell what they're trying to ask. I'm like, listen, just meet him. If you have any bad feelings, just tell him you can't
Yeah.
do it now.
Tell me
And
now.
it's like, this guy, I would send him before I send me. Like,
Yeah.
that's the guy I'm sending you right now,
Yeah.
because he's the younger, happier version of me.
Got it. Got it.
But the thing is, you got to just make those decisions,
Sure.
and they're not based on science. And
Nope.
sometimes you're wrong, and you just got to own it.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's the
It's
biggest
not a
thing I learned with
blueprint.
age. Yeah, the biggest thing I learned with age as a contractor, or probably anybody that's in any kind of a profession or a skill where you are kind of. I showed recording stop. We're still on, right? Thank you. But yeah, you just learn over time. You're like, it's a success thing. If it's a success thing
Yep.
versus an ego thing, you're
Yep.
good.
Well, Chris, this has
All
been
right.
very helpful. I think this will drive a lot of answers for people. I really appreciate you taking the time. Congratulations on Coast Sierra. I know that's been a labor of love. We will put Chris's contact information in the show notes, so you can contact Chris if you have questions, or just message me if you have questions. Reminder: give us a like, give us subscribe. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. And Chris, thanks again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clark. We're on a BNI. I just want you to know I have a
Awesome.
couple of
Love
referrals
to hear
for
it.
you.
Have a great weekend, and thanks for joining,
Cheers.
everybody. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.